Good evening, as it is here in Central Europe. I guess it's about 11 o'clock in the morning, is it, Vanch, where you are, more or less?
10 minutes away from 10.
10 minutes to 10, so it's sort of mid-morning, if you like, in San Diego, am I right?
Yep.
Cool. Obviously, San Diego's been hosted a tournament recently, and I think you got to pop along, right?
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. It was a WTA 500 event. So I
Cool.
got to go for the semifinals. Got to see Swiatek play against Pagula and win a three-set match there. And then I got to see uh, unfortunately, the matches kept getting interrupted by rain. And that's
Yeah.
that's really something we don't see very often where I live in San Diego. But of course, the tennis gods decided that was the day. And then,
Yeah.
then I had also seen Collins face off in the second semifinal against
hmm
Donan Bekic, who was having a resurgent week. So some good tennis.
The women's has been quite exciting, of course, of late, with Guadalajara coming, and we've got the final tonight with Maria Sakkari against Vanch. You're going to have to help me here.
Yeah, Jessica Pegula.
Oh, so Sakkari won, by the way, because her
Oh,
match
actually,
carried.
Sakari still has to finish her
Right.
semifinal with
Yeah, she's
Buskova,
a
so
set
that's
up.
not a given. But um, certainly, she's the favorite to get through, and then would place Pegula in the final, which would be interesting because they've each only won one title, but they're both far too good to only have that on their resume. So it'll be
Yeah,
good
it'll be
opportunity.
interesting who handles the occasion better. I think Pagula probably has a slightly better reputation in that sense. So, but Sakkari's done really well, and of course, she's made the end of year finals. But we are not here to talk about Sakkari. We are here to talk about a fellow Greek, who's, let's say, he's had an up and down 18 months. I know I'm a bit more down than up, and Vanch is slightly more up than down. So it's be interesting to see where we agree and where we disagree.
Mhm.
Let's start with today,
Yeah.
because Tsitsipas has been in action, played against Holger Rune for the second time in his career, and it won't be the only time that Holger Rune gets mentioned in this podcast. And what happened, Vanch?
Yeah, so this was an interesting one going in. Of course, if you remember, they played in the fourth round of the French Open,
Yeah,
um, where Holger Rune defeated Tsitsipas in four sets. These two, obviously, they go back. They train at the Murtoglu Academy together a lot.
yeah,
They're good friends. They play doubles together. They know each other's games inside and out. Obviously, Patrick Murtoglu is now working with Holger Rune, so that throws a different dynamic into it all, I think.
yeah.
But I think overall it's a very difficult matchup for Tsitsipas tactically. A few
Okay.
reasons. One of the things that Tsitsipas tends to struggle with is pace absorption in general. And Holger
Okay.
Rune is a player. I want to give him a lot of credit because he played a tremendous final, and really,
hmm
I think tactically his game plan was spot on, and he executed it to perfection. And I think one of the things he did really well in this match was take advantage of his superior backhand, especially in the cross court backhand rallies. I just feel like he has a lot more firepower, a lot more options. It's a lot more precise. It's heavier. It's a play that he will feel really comfortable going cross court and trading backhands with Tsitsipas, who we know likes to camp in the ad side, and he's looking to get forehands, as many forehands as he possibly can, and get to the net, and that's his game. But if Holger Rune uses his backhand on the line, which is what he did so well in this match, it's it opens up a lot more options for him. And then Tsitsipas is really pressed and having to go for a lot more, especially because Holger Rune defends so well and he moves exceptionally well. He has a great, um, I think he backs himself a lot, and he's confident. So and he
Yeah.
played really well today. I think he only faced one break point
Okay.
in the whole match, and he saved that pretty nicely with a forehand approach to Tsitsipas's backhand.
I'm glad you mentioned the French Open defeat because that will feature quite highly. I just made a note as you were talking about changes to their game and improvements. I just made a quick note as to what you were saying. Is there anything? And so, by the way, let's hands up. I'm, as I say, a bit more down on Tsitsipas in the last 18 months. I know he's had a
Yep.
fairly good win record, if you like, regarding this year in particular. But I think he's played a lot of tennis, that's for sure. And he's had not so many injuries. I know he had the elbow injury at the end of last year, but that seems to have cleared up. But the note I made as you were talking is there anything Tsitsipas has significantly improved in the last 18 months?
You mean sort of game wise? I would say
Yeah, game
he's
wise.
definitely with the help of Thomas Enquist and Thomas. I think Enquist helped him a lot, and then also Mark Philippoussis. They've tried to make him use his slice backhand a little bit in different ways to change up the rhythm of rallies. I think we saw that a little bit in the grass court season. I would say that's one of the positives of his year. Maybe if you could look back the title that he won in Mallorca, I saw a great use of the slice backhand, getting it down low, absorbing pace a little bit better, and also just setting up his forehand with it. And I think as the season, and it's been kind of a bit on and off because he doesn't quite trust it as much in certain matches and situations. I think even though he lost to Kyrgios, there were some positives in that match,
Yeah. Yeah, I
tactically,
agree.
and he was pretty close to pushing that to a fifth set. So
Yeah.
I think I think I would say on grass is where I would say he's made the most improvements. Otherwise, I would say he still has the same kind of issues coming to bear in these kind of matchups, and I think it's also very mental because now he's lost so many finals
Hmm.
against similar type of opponents. I mean, if you look at the George match in Cincinnati and you look at the Djokovic match, he's also not competing with that same tenacity and that Mamba
Agree.
mentality that he really used to have. That was one of the things I loved about Tsitsipas when he first broke through in 2018 and 2019 when I watched him is like this guy is tough as nails. He has grit. He
Hmm.
has this kind of he plays the big points well. He backs himself. He has that kind of, and now I see a lot of checking out in rallies. Going
Yep.
to the shot too early, not chasing balls down. But I know he has the speed to do. I know he can get there. I know he can. I just feel like he's a bit dejected, a bit down on himself. And I'm not seeing a lot of positive emotion either, and it just looks like it's kind of a spiraling effect. And there's maybe some baggage accumulation from some of those tough losses, which yeah, I mean because he does well throughout the week to win these tough matches that other players might lose those matches, even some top players, and he actually comes through and he's made so many semifinals and finals. The problem is cashing them in for titles, and
Yep.
I think he's made 7 finals this year and he's won just 2 of them.
One, just two. One was a grass court 250, I think, and the
Yeah,
other,
and
of
the other
course,
was
is
Monte
Patrick.
Carlo. So
Yeah. I mean, talking about sort of switching off or seemingly tanking points, I don't think he's tanked a match necessarily, but certainly a
mm,
couple of points. I remember in that Borna Coric final I think it's in the tiebreak as well, which is such an unusual moment to sort of give up, if you like. And in fact, really, it was straight sets in the end for Coric,
mm,
who was obviously in a bit of a purple patch in terms of his form, but it was a concern, and that concern continued into the US Open. But before I
yeah,
come to the US Open this year, let's wind the clock back 2 years, basically, or a bit less than 2 years, say 20 months. And
yeah,
you mentioned the grit, and I think that's something in 2018, 2019, of course, when he beat Federer in Australia. Perhaps people were highlighting, and you said you were quite happy with that. I would say for the next 2 years, it became a question, particularly against, for example, Rafa. But he did seem to make another big step forward when he came from 2 sets down to Rafa in Australia to win. He goes out in the semi-finals in Australia, but I would say at that point in his career, that was another monkey off his back because I think playing Nadal is someone that he was more scared of even than the other big two members, if you like. But so
mm,
that was a great turning point for him. I would say that he was, whatever the expression is, below par or above par, or it was a good tournament for him. He went probably one round further than many anticipated, particularly after being 2 sets down. So I thought that's a good thing. Then he tore up the clay season. He was amazing. He won Monte Carlo, I think. He got to the final in Barcelona, and he was within a millimeter or two of winning that match against
mm,
Rafa. But it is Rafa in Barcelona on the court named after him. He goes into the French Open. He has an unbelievable French Open on the back of a couple of other good clay court seasons. I think he was very close to beating Djokovic, of course, in 2020 in that October French Open. So again, and I've gone for the picture, by the way. I don't know if you saw the picture on the thumbnail. It's more or less around the time of not the change of the guard, but it's certainly from this match, this 2021 final, and 2 sets up against Djokovic. And this particular picture, I think, is taken at some point during sets 1 or 2, because I was fortunate enough to be at that final. And he's got clay on the back of his back, because I think he's fallen over at one
yeah,
point. But he's won those first 2 very, very tight sets to put himself in an excellent position to win his first Grand Slam at probably on his best surface. But he is pretty good on a hard court too. And then comes the turning point, if you like. He ends up losing that match in 5. It is Djokovic. It is arguably the greatest player of all time. It is somebody who's been getting better and better, I think, throughout his career, certainly on clay anyway. And of course, Djokovic had beaten Rafa in the semis. Funny enough, he changed his clay-stained T-shirt, I think, at the end of the second set, and he never was quite the same player. I wouldn't quite go as far as to say that, but Djokovic had his toilet break, and we all know, recharged the batteries and came out and just was blistering, and Tsitsipas couldn't quite live with him through the next 3 sets.
yeah,
No shame in that. Loses that final, but we're still thinking, okay, you've just made your first major final. Okay, the clay court season is pretty much done, but we've got Wimbledon, we've got the US Open, then we've got Australia again, and so on and so forth. But from that match onwards, he's not been in another Grand Slam final. he then goes out in round 3 to Alcaraz in the US. And I know this was kind of Alcaraz's maybe breakthrough slam, I think, in terms of we really, even the most ignorant person in tennis first became aware of Alcaraz in that US Open. Many of us, of course, been aware of him for a lot longer, but you know what I mean. But still, that was a bit of a concern to lose to the next best thing, if you like. And then in Australia, he went into that in 2022, and probably in my opinion, his best performance of the year came against Sinner in this year's quarterfinals. And I use this expression about being over par, under par, or whatever you want to call it. I would say from the French Open onwards until now, at all the 6 majors, I think it is he's played, he's not done better than he should have done, if you like. He's either done as well. I would say Australia 2022, no shame in losing to Medvedev, I think in 4 sets. It was a really good match, actually. But since then, he's had some horrible defeats at majors. And, okay, I think he did okay. But that defeat to Holger Rune, when that draw opened up, when you had Rafa, Alcaraz, Zverev, and Djokovic all on one side, he should be getting to that final despite his matchup with Holger Rune. What do you think?
Yeah, I think those are all fair points, especially Roland Garros and US Open. I think those are the 2 biggest tournaments for me where I just felt like he really missed a chance because, as we know, his slated quarterfinal in both those tournaments was Casper Ruud. And the difference was that Casper Ruud got there. And then he, I guess had a good favorable draw and played some really good tennis and got to both of those finals. And Tsitsipas just didn't. The match against Rune, if I remember correctly, he was up a break in the first set. He just played a horrible game, missed a lot of forehands, kind of lost that first set, started to make a bit of a comeback and won the second, but then his level was way too up and down during that match to give himself a fighting chance. And then I would say, yeah, during the grass court season, he did improve a bit, and that was the best I've seen him play on grass since 2018. Yep. So that was a step in the right direction. And then I thought, Cincinnati, I thought he took a long break after that for about 5 or 6 weeks where he didn't play any tournaments, and I thought that was a good thing because I thought, okay, now he can reset. He plays a lot of tennis anyway. He can focus on recharging the batteries a bit, training, with Philip Pusas in his corner, and then he can make a good run for the U.S. Open. Unfortunately, the U.S. Open is also another tournament where he just really doesn't do well in. And some of that is maybe past losses. Obviously, the George loss, the Alcaraz loss you mentioned the Alcaraz one. And
could have gone out to Murray in that as well. Don't forget that was the whole toilet gate match. I mean, he was so close to losing to Andy Murray. It was 5 sets as well. So he was he's always, that's the other thing. Even in Roland Garros this year, okay, he goes out to Holger Rune. But I was watching him play matches before that thinking, this guy's going out soon if he keeps playing this bad. I don't want to say badly, but he was going to 5 sets against players he shouldn't have been going to. At least one, I remember, really pushed him hard and I didn't expect it. And actually, when he goes out to Holger Rune, it's like, well, maybe the pressure of having that draw open up for him. And I think if he'd have got to the final, by the way, I think he'd have probably put up a better fight than Casper Ruud did against Rafa. I'm not saying he would have won, but I certainly think he needs to be getting to that final. And then this year's US Open, boy, oh boy, he lost in 4 sets to Garin. Of course, one of them was 6-love. And I'll tell you how shocking it was. It even took, I think the same night, Serena was playing Kontaveit in one of the most memorable matches of the year, especially on the women's side. I think it was that night. Certainly Serena was playing. I'm not sure if
it was the first round.
Could have been the first round. You're right. Yes, it wasn't Kontaveit. But still, that had all of the attention from all of us. Nevertheless, I did see Pam Shriver and one or two others go, what's going on? Tsitsipas has lost 6-love. I think it was the first set.
Yeah, that was one of those unexplainable matches because, like you said, everyone was watching Serena. And that was the same night that Fritz lost to his countrymen.
Yeah, he did. Yeah, I think he was up in that match as well, Fritz.
And then Tsitsipas also lost. And then I remember thinking 6-love, 5-love. I remember checking the score and being I thought it was a mistake because I thought okay, maybe Tsitsipas is up 6-love, 5-love. This app is wrong. and actually it wasn't the case. And like I think the US Open has put up extended highlights of that match and he just didn't show up for the first 2 sets. It was definitely I just don't know what happened. I know he got treatment on his elbow a little bit later in the match, and then he started to make a push of it. But when you lose the first 2 sets like that, you've dug yourself into a really deep hole, as it is. And I think he was even up a break in the 4th and had some chances to push it to a 5th, which then I would have liked his chances. But it's just, it's like, that was that was a match he just totally wants to wipe out of his memory. Like, just don't even think that happened if you're Steph.
On the
So
positive side, he has
so on the
made the
positive side, he did bounce back from that, and he
yeah,
did make, he looked very good against Schwartzman at the Laver Cup, and it's the
yeah.
Laver Cup, so it's super tie break. I don't know how much you can really read into that. It was a good match against Tiafo. He lost it in the end, but and then he makes that run in Astana, and I feel like he's doing well against certain opponents, like Zverev, for example. He's beaten him twice now this year
Mhm.
on clay. He beat him and he's beaten him pretty much, like, generally he likes that matchup in
Yep.
terms of, I think it's 8-4 is their head to head, and he's won 6 of their last 8. And
Rublev too, I think he tends to come
and
off better,
Rublev
especially on clay.
Rublev, especially on an indoor hard court, I thought that was a good win because Rublev was playing some really good tennis, and indoor hard is Rublev's best surface. And I thought he actually might lose that match, to be honest, in the
Mhm.
semis. And he came back from a set down and played some really good tennis. And then obviously the final happened, and Novak is Novak, and he's gonna do what he does. But it was
But
not
not
really a
laying a
close.
glove on Novak, is there not an element of because he was getting closer to Novak, especially on clay, let's say, and he I can't remember, too many meetings on hard between the 2 at majors anyway, but certainly on
Yeah,
clay, I mean, he had an unbelievable semi-final with him in Rome in that 2021. I think this is Tsitsipas's peak, if you like. Throughout that clay court season, he was either really good, really, really good or unbelievable at various points. And I think even 2020,
yeah.
obviously, get to the French Open semis as well, pushing Novak there too. And I like this comment from Ghost, by the way, in terms of expectations. Tsitsipas, it does feel a bit Dimitrov-esque. I'm not saying it's going to be. I just think he's got to arrest this situation quite quickly as these guys, whether it be Holger Rune or whether it be, of course, Tsitsipas or Sinner, come flying past. I mean, it's the same for, to some extent, Medvedev and Zverev, of course. They're both, Zverev's out injured. Dominic Thiem, of course, is trying to sort of make a comeback, if you like, if you know what I mean. But these guys are coming past. They're not, even Felix is not going to be hanging around.
Yeah, that whole generation of 2002, 2000 to 2003 is really coming on strong with Felix, Alcaraz, Rune, Musetti, Sinner. Like, these guys are just getting better and better and better. And obviously, he still has matchup issues against Djokovic. I mean, Djokovic is always going to be there, but Djokovic, I guess Rafa, Medvedev, Zverev is going to be tough, but he likes that matchup. And so and then Kyrgios as well, and Chorich. And so there's certainly some matchups that are really tough right now for Tsitsipas, and he's got to work it out mentally. And I think some of that is also these some of these technical weaknesses. I think everyone just knows their game plan right now against Steph. They know that he's going to camp out in the backhand corner. They know he's going to want to look for forehands. They know that the down the line is going to be open. They know he's going to serve and then sort of fall to his left a little bit. And then they also know that in finals, he knows, and everyone else knows, that his record isn't very good. And so I think all of these things just play tricks on your mind. I would say on the Dimitrov point, one encouraging thing is that Tsitsipas is still one of the most consistent players. So in
Hmm.
terms of getting to semis and finals, he's going to get there a lot more consistently than Dimitrov ever did. And the good thing is that he can play really. He's really good right now at winning ugly. So he can win a lot of matches when he's not playing well at all, like when he's at 65 or 70%. And now it's just about showing up for the big matches and competing really hard. I just want to see him compete, honestly, because it's fine to lose the way he did, let's say, to Rafa in Barcelona. Like, that's a
Yeah,
really good way to lose, or something. Or even
yeah.
the Djokovic matches where he was up 2 sets, even the French Open one where he came back from a couple of sets down. It just feels like he has that one or two service games where he kind of, like, he plays a really hard point, he loses it, goes down left 15, and then he kind of, for the rest of the game, he doesn't believe so much anymore, and it sort of carries over in the next game, where I think the best players are able to reset. They're sort of able to say, okay, next point, here we go again. And he used to be able to do that, but now it's just some of that baggage accumulation, I think.
What do we think about the father-son, perhaps even mother-son to some extent? We've seen her appear at press conferences as well that
Yeah, a couple
Tsitsipas has
years
appeared
ago.
at. I mean, I mentioned about improvements. I think you made some good points. I think the slice, which was almost non-existent, has appeared. He's got a bit better on grass, but there has been a stagnation, I think, on the other surfaces, and certainly in terms of results, it's actually regressed. Um, do we think that maybe, I mean, is he still working with Enquist? I don't think he is. That was like in January, February, I think he was on board.
No, I don't think so anymore. he was working with Philip Husas, but I think that was only for the grass court and U.S. Open stretch.
Yeah.
So I think it's kind of on and off. I think the problem is that his dad, like sort of the coach, doesn't have to work with only him. He has to work with his dad too. And I think his dad is so involved, and he's sort of one of those parents who wants to achieve his dream of like, I want to get there. I want to get there to I want to get there along with my son and help him win a major. It almost feels like he's not really able to step back a little bit and understand that, okay, maybe he has to take a little bit of a step back. He has to. I don't think it's really good for Stefanos either to have to rely on his dad so much, just in terms of his life in general, not
Yeah.
just tennis on the court. I just feel like there has to be a bit of a, he needs to. I think it's really hard to say, like obviously, it's very easy for me to sit here and say like he should just completely cut ties and cut the cord and he shouldn't be his coach anymore. But I just think there's so much going on emotionally behind the scenes between the two and between the whole family in general. Obviously they also have Petros, they have Pavlos, they have, it's a big family. So I think those family dynamics make it really hard, especially when, yeah, when he's also his dad. Like it's just it's a little bit rough, and that's why he gets a lot of he used to get a lot of coaching violations before this rule was implemented, and it just
What's the
seems.
situation with the rule? Are we going to see that remain, or because I know they said it's an experiment till the end of the year? I think pretty much from about August to the end of the year. Do you think it will remain next year, or would you like it to remain? What are your thoughts on this coaching from the sidelines rule that they've allowed for the last few months?
So personally, I'm kind of with Taylor Fritz. I don't really like it because I
Mm.
think I just think the whole awesome thing about tennis is you figuring it out on yourself on the spot, uh, thinking tactically, making those adjustments, and it's a one-on-one sort of you're in your own headspace. That's what I really enjoy. And if I have someone in my corner, kind of, and that influences the match amazingly. I don't think we've seen a situation where like like we've seen a really good back and forth between coaches and players to where like they're pulling out data or they're doing some kind of uh, you know like they're really giving some really sound tactical advice. Mostly I just see a lot of words of encouragement or a lot of like, let's go, come on, or a lot of talk in different languages. And maybe some of it is tactical with like the hand signals and whatnot, but I just don't think we're in a really good spot for it right now. Like I'm okay with it just being like a trial for 6 months, but I kind of I'm not a big fan of it. How about yourself?
Yeah, no, I'm the same. I think basically Taylor Fritz summed it up perfectly. I think you take away one of the really cool things about tennis. I often watch a coach with the player before the match, let's say, and bearing in mind we have roofs at most tournaments now. You know that when the coach says goodbye, I do think about this. When the coach says goodbye to the player, at 10 minutes before the match begins, if you like, or whatever, I do think it's kind of amazing that they're not gonna really be with each other for the next 3 hours, and then history will be made or otherwise, whatever way the match goes, especially when it comes to a final. So I like that. I like the fact that this is an extra. It makes it different from other sports, which I think is great about tennis, that players have to problem solve. I think we should reward players for problem solving. I think we should reward coaches for being an excellent coach. But to be honest with you, their job is done 10 minutes before the match, if you like. They've prepared their players best they can. Of course, they can give a bit of support from the sidelines. But that aside, I love it that the really, really good players do problem solve. They do, for example, think, okay, things are not working. I'm going to be a bit more attacking on the return position. I'm going to come in a bit closer to the baseline or the other way around. Or I think, listen, I'm not anywhere near a professional myself, but I like it when I'm playing. I think, what can I do to arrest this situation that's been going on for a set and a half, if you like, if you're getting a bad beating, if you're whatever. And of course, sometimes it doesn't work, but players like Rafa, Novak, and Roger on the men's side, but also there's plenty on the women's side. One of their greatest attributes is problem solving, and I think you take that away. And I think it's a real shame because I think it's one of the things that makes tennis unique, and we really need to accentuate these unique things. It's just a bit silly, and the idea that it's one of the reasons, one of the people that defend the idea is because you can't police it. I think you
Mm,
can. I think you can
yeah.
police it pretty well. We've seen with obviously Stefanos' father, who, by the way, I've actually watched Stefanos' father play as well at the academy in Nice, where Mouratoglou's got his academy. And he's funny enough, he's got a similar squeak that sometimes Tsitsipas introduces to his vocal cords when things get really tight, especially towards the end of a match. Like I remember against Rafa in that Barcelona file, there was a few more squeaks, and his father is even squeakier with the on the shot. And by the way, regarding that and regarding Tsitsipas, you mentioned the backhand. It is something that's been highlighted a lot. I felt in 2021 it was a bit more solid. Often we were waiting for it to break down, and of course it still did from time to time. But I thought in that quarterfinal against Rafa in Australia, that was one of the things that just didn't break down for those last 3 sets. Rafa could have and maybe should have won that in straight sets. Of course, he had a couple of one easy smash certainly that he missed in the tie break at the end of that third set. But hats off to Tsitsipas for turning that around. And I just haven't seen a kicking on since then that I hoped I would, particularly after the clay court season. I'm not saying that. I mean, but I saw Ghost mention earlier about his potential. That's the thing. He's got the potential to win 2, 3, 4 majors, which would be unbelievable. If we ignore, players like the big three, anyone winning multiple majors has had a really, really good career. And I just hope that he can get back to winning ways fairly soon.
Yeah, I feel the same way. I thought, coming in, I thought he was going to win between 1 and 3. That was kind of what I had in mind when I was watching him in
Yeah.
2019 and early 2020, certainly. 2021, yeah, like you mentioned the backhand being more solid. I think it's actually really solid when he's like not rushed on it, when he has a lot of time and when he's able to just, like camp out in the forehand corner and just unload. That's when I feel like its backhand can be really devastating. There were times in Astana and Stockholm, and especially on indoor hard courts, where I've seen his backhand like really flourish. He's hitting it better down the line. He's opening it up with the angles. It's when he's playing against a player who hits with a lot of depth and a lot of pace. That's what I feel like it just, even the one slight chance that he'll get, he won't drive the backhand anymore. He'll go for a drop shot, or he'll go for a sort of a semi. He'll run around it, or he won't give himself enough margin. He'll try to make his forehand extra good, and we know that doesn't quite work because now you're overcompensating. And
Yeah.
but in certain matchups, like when he plays someone outside of the top 20 or someone outside of the top 10, his backhand can sometimes like actually it's not like a team esque type down the line. That's another shot that I feel like if he has in his arsenal, a down the line flat backhand, he would be really, really, really dangerous because obviously, we know his forehand is elite, both defensively and offensively. But if he, let's say, I mean, Dominic Thiem is a really good example. I feel like in the first 4 or 5 years of his career, he had some similar issues with pace absorption. He wasn't so good when he was pinned in that backhand corner. He would often go to a slice, and his slice would float, or he would be rushed. It still can sometimes happen from time to time. But exactly, this comment right here, Team reminded us in Antwerp this week, who has one of the best backhands in tennis. Ghost is right. Like his backhand, the way he can change directions with it, the way he can take it super early down the line. There was that one shot this week where he was like meters behind the baseline and like in the side corner, basically near the spectators, and he somehow found an angle like that. I'm not saying Tsitsipas's technique is just completely different. He tends to brush up on the stroke a lot more, and he tends to give it a lot more shape. The problem with that is that it falls short a bit too much. And then now you have someone like a Chorich or a Rune today or a Djokovic just saying, okay, no problem. I can just pepper that, take that early on the rise down the line, and then you're on the defense.
That match against Rafa in 2021, I know I've mentioned it a couple of times already, but it was the backhand down the line with Rafa where he can be a bit exposed sometimes because he's kind of very confident in his forehand, if you like, so he leaves a huge margin there. But it was so consistent. I just remember from after the first 2 sets, I don't remember that many mistakes. I don't think Rafa really threatened. Rafa was it felt like he was hanging on really from the moment that he didn't win that third set tiebreak. He seemed like he was puffing a bit as well, and it was Tsitsipas who was the stronger player at the really crucial moments from the end of set 3 onwards, which is a real feather in his cap, bearing in mind we know how clutch Rafa could be. You don't win 22 majors if you're not. But since like the French Open final, there does seem to be an edge missing. There does seem to be a sadness. I know that we've mentioned the father thing. I know Kathy's been mentioned that in the live chat as well. Just that, it must be quite devastating to see your father, because he walked out today, apparently. I didn't know that. Apostolis pretty much walked away from the stadium. Oh, he didn't even get a runners-up trophy. That was quite funny from Stefanos. He said, I'm quite pleased not to get a runners-up trophy today. I've got too many in recent ones.
Yeah.
I mean, he's a funny
Yeah,
guy. He's charismatic. I felt very sorry for him. I was at his press conference at Wimbledon after he lost to Kyrgios, and I think he left that press conference. Bearing in mind, Kyrgios came in just after. There were two very different viewpoints, let's say, on the match, but
yeah,
also amongst journalists. It was like, because he wasn't perfect in that match in terms of being innocent, but he held his
mhm,
hands up and he made some interesting insights regarding Nick. And I think most people in the media room were fairly sympathetic for for Tsitsipas's plight. And then we had the slightly more abrasive press conference from Kyrgios, as is his wont. And I think that everyone left both those two press conferences thinking the good guy didn't win today, so to speak.
yeah. I felt pretty much exactly the same. That was one of the best press conferences I've seen him give because he was open and honest, and he really, I think, exposed some of the flaws in Nick's character, and he did it in a
Definitely.
way that was, it was quite bold and quite well put. I would say the way he phrased things,
Very.
and
He
and he knows he
apologized
wasn't innocent in
for
that
hitting the
match.
ball he apologized for
Yeah,
hitting the ball into the crowd. He fronted up. It's like, I shouldn't have done it. Frustration got the better of me. And I
yeah,
just wish that we could see that sometimes from Nick as well.
yeah. I don't expect to see that, but
No.
definitely, yeah. That's one of Nick's flaws. But I guess on Steph's side, yeah, it's one of those where like something has to change because I feel like this pattern will just keep on happening, and maybe it's just like I know he's going to be in the top five. I know he's going to be in the top eight. He'll probably qualify for the ATP finals again next year. But the question is like, you know, eh, I don't want to say the window is closed. I don't think it has. I mean,
No.
he's still only 24.
Yeah.
And most if we look at all the major champions before Alcaraz won it this year, everyone from 2012 Australian Open onwards has been at least 25. So it's
Mhm.
like, so it's not normal to win a major before then nowadays.
Mhm.
But it's just with all these players coming up, and you mentioned Roland Garros as well. It's like he kind of needs a really clutch performance and a good draw for him to get to another final again in a major. And
Mhm.
it feels like things need to work out in a different, like this year, like last year also, Djokovic and Nadal were in the other half.
Yeah.
And then he had the
Zverev.
half with Medvedev in the quarters and Zverev in the semis, and those are matches where at least he knows he can, especially with Medvedev on clay. He knows he has the better of him there, and then
Yeah.
against Zverev he feels pretty comfortable in mixing things up with his variety and his all court play. But um, yeah, like and the other thing is that I think in the first half of this year too, he wasn't serving as well as he normally did as well, and so he was having a lot of games where he missed so many first serves, or he kind of just had a set and a break, and he kind of just let the other guy come back, and y- it was a set all, and then all of a sudden he's having to go the distance against players that he really should have been putting away in straight sets. And I think that
Yeah.
just makes a difference psychologically. It affects your confidence, and
Definitely.
um,
Yeah.
on the one hand, it's like amazing that he's able to win ugly and win so many matches. You see, he has the most match wins of anyone on the tour, and so many semis. And it's just, I was looking at his stats. I think he's played 118 ATP tournaments since 2017, and he's made the semis or better in 42 of them.
Yeah.
And then you see he has 9 titles, so it's
Yeah.
like so many semis. I think 24 finals, and it's those bigger matches, and I feel like that's where the baggage is coming.
Yeah. I mean, listen, we could be talking about a great end of year for him. If he goes and wins one of the two big tournaments left on the men's side, if he wins either Paris Bercy or in particular the ATP finals. I think he's won the ATP finals before, right? He won in 2019, I think.
Yeah, he did,
Um,
and that was one of the best tournaments I've ever seen him play. Like, the
right.
players that he beat in that tournament, Federer in the semis, team in the final, just utterly destroyed Zverev in the round robin match. Beat
Yeah.
Medvedev as well on indoors, who was on a phenomenal streak. So and indoors generally does seem to bode well for him. All of his titles on hard court have been indoors. He's yet to win an outdoor hard court title, and
Yeah.
he's yet to win a Masters 1000 on hard court. So I think that would probably be the next step for him. So in terms of him improving, I would say he's not regressed, but he's not progressed either. So
Right.
he's kind of stayed the same to me. He's kind of been the same player. Results wise, his win loss is about the same as it was last year. It really just comes down to the bigger matches, in my opinion.
Yeah. Hey, listen, I mean, it's been great talking to you, Vanch. I don't know if you've got any more things to say. I'm just looking at his sort of trophy-laden career, if you like. I think you said it's 2, 7, 9, yeah, 9 trophies or 9 tournaments he's won since 2018. He's always won at least one tournament every year, which is in his favor, if you like, and he's won 2 this year. I just think that, as you say, he hasn't kicked on since Paris, and I think his performances at the majors in particular, but even when you mention the semi-finals and the finals, as soon as he comes up against somebody, oh, that one could be tricky, he loses.
Yeah,
Like, whether it be Djokovic in the final, but of course, they don't come much trickier than Djokovic on a hard court. But even like today, it's like Holger Rune, that one could be tricky, or Borna Coric in Cincinnati. He managed to get the win over Medvedev in the semi-final, which again, it was
yeah,
actually
that was
to
a good
some extent
match.
a false dawn because of how the final panned out, and then also how his US Open, performance went. So there's been a few false dawns, I would say, in the last 18 months. And I hope he arrests the slide soon because I think he's generally a nice guy. He's great to have on tour. We could well be talking about a guy who wins his first major next year. And if that happens, then, I might have to delete this podcast. But I'm just a bit concerned now, given it's been 18 months now of inconsistency, let's say.
Yeah, and for sure, like um, the Australian Open is actually maybe his best major now because he's made the semis three times and he's got like a really really good. I think he just loves Australia. Like he gets a lot of support from the crowd. The
Yep,
Greek population
a
is
lot of
really
Greek
big
population.
there.
Fun fact
Uh,
for you, Vanch. You're getting praised, by the way, for your stat regarding Tsitsipas indoors and outdoors and all that. But I'll give you a fun fact for you regarding the Greek population. Melbourne is the 3rd largest city with a Greek population in the world after Athens
wow.
and Thessaloniki. So it's the 3rd most live in Melbourne. So it's unsurprising that he gets a nice level of support there. He got to the semi-finals again there this year, losing to Medvedev when Medvedev looked like he was just unstoppable and basically was until midway through the 3rd set, if you like, against Rafa. So there seemed to be no shame in that. I thought that performance against Sinner did sort of take my breath away, actually, that quarterfinal against Sinner, because I remember going into the tournament, he hadn't really had a great end of the year the previous year. He'd obviously had the elbow issue as well, and I think he hadn't played any tennis. I don't even know. He might have played ATP Cup, but I don't know. And if he did, he didn't certainly pull up any trees. I think he did play ATP Cup. I think I remember him playing Schwartzman there, but,
Yeah,
it wasn't looking good for him going
but he
into
wasn't
Australia.
healthy.
So
Yeah,
yeah, so I was really, and I thought Sinner could win this match, but it was straight sets, and like I said, probably the best performance of the year. I know he won in Monte Carlo, but that Monte Carlo felt like a one-off in terms of Novak went out early because he'd barely played all year. Rafa was injured. Alcaraz went out early, unusually as well, and so suddenly, and even then, Tsitsipas did quite a good job of trying to throw it away on a few occasions, but he managed to pull through, and it's probably a bit of a forgotten title for him in many ways. Consider it as a Masters 1000. I think it's probably maybe one of the least memorable just because we didn't have these Alcaraz Djokovic matches like we had in Madrid, or Alcaraz Rafa in Indian Wells, I remember, or some of the drama at some of the other 1000s, with obviously in Miami, Alcaraz tearing it up. So
yeah.
we
If I
just,
remember correctly, in Monte Carlo, Alcaraz and Djokovic were supposed to play in the quarters, and they were on one
yeah,
half, and then Rafa obviously wasn't playing, and then you had Tsitsipas on the other half,
yeah,
and he beat Davidovich Fokina in the final, who actually
yeah,
had like an amazing tournament. He beat Djokovic and
yeah,
like beat Fritz in the quarters, and then but it was really the semis against Zverev where I thought, okay, like he can do this again. He can have another awesome clay season. I think he just like utterly destroyed Zverev in the semis, and then I thought, okay, this is good. He can do this again at the French Open, and it just didn't happen.
right.
That because he
It
was
was
supposed to
Schwartz.
get to the final there.
It was Schwartzman in particular, that match. To be fair to Stefanos, actually, he didn't do too badly in the semis and the final without dropping a set. But I think it's quite nice. It's a nice final to have Davidovich Fokina on the other side of the net rather than Rafa,
Yeah,
Carlos, or Djokovic. But hats off to him for winning that. But it's just funny enough, Monte Carlo, it's the beginning of the clay court season in many respects, certainly in terms of being the Masters level, and it normally is a memorable tournament. But I think Djokovic losing to Davidovich Fokina at the beginning of that tournament took a lot of the headlines because everyone was like, wow, Djokovic looks really a long way off. But Djokovic, being Djokovic, managed to win in Rome, amongst others. But in Rome, that was another one where Tsitsipas lost against Djokovic. And I don't know, it was just another it was just, yeah, I don't know, just didn't leave a good feeling. It's not like it was I think it was in straight sets in Rome, if I remember rightly.
yeah. It was a bagel first set, and then he actually
Oh
had
yeah,
he was up 4-1 in the second, and he had two break points to serve for a breadstick. And then, it was kind of quasi-competitive in the tiebreak, but you still kind of knew Djokovic had the upper hand, and yeah, it was pretty decisive actually in the end, in the 7-6 in the second set. But yeah,
Yeah.
that was another match where he could have easily lost in the first round. I think he was down match points against Dimitrov in the first round, and he managed to squeak through there and never really played his
Yeah, I
best.
remember that.
But then he had those good wins over Khachanov and Sinner and Zverev, and I still thought, okay, this is, this he might just find a way, but it just catches up to you eventually if your level isn't good enough and you just have one too many dips. It's tough, and I also think during this period, another thing that I don't think gets talked about much is because of his elbow injury, he was having to switch a lot of things in his
Changed
uh,
his racket, I
like
know, at one point,
technology.
and
I know he
strength.
changed his rackets, and he had a more of a I think Jimmy from Twitter, like he's actually really good with the string details, so he'd be
Mhm.
able to correct me if I'm wrong. But he used to use like a half poly and half synthetic kind of a mix, and then he switched to like all poly, but it's supposed to be like softer on the arm. But then it sacrifices a lot of power and gives you more control. So that can be tough, like just in his mindset, just getting used to those strings. And I think he actually like mentioned that once in the clay season, and I took note of that. But I was like, okay, he's still having good results. Like, but it's just one of those things. And then he switched to like a different racket as well, like same kind of brand and lining, but just a few minor changes just
Yeah.
to adjust for his elbow, which does seem to be kind of a chronic thing. Like he's mentioned it was on and off for a couple of years, but so far it looks pretty good. And maybe it's hopefully it doesn't flare up again at some point. But
I must admit, I'm
who
not
knows?
aware of this regarding Rafa. I'm fairly on top of most of the things that have occurred in Rafa's career. But Ghost here just asking, didn't Rafa change his hitting form at one point in the middle of his career to avoid injury? Um, and Ghost suggested that that's not unprecedented as well. I don't recall that from Rafa. I mean, I certainly think he has made improvements considering in his mid-20s,
Yeah,
we thought he'd be done by 30 with his knees. And it's funny enough, it's been just about every other part of his body since then that's sort of broken down on him. But
his
anyway,
serve
listen, like,
has changed a
go
lot,
on.
right? His serve technique, and
Yeah,
he's
definitely.
changing.
Yeah,
He definitely tinkers with that all the time, even middle of the seasons, middle of. Rafa's great at that, like just adapting and
yeah, and that's the thing with Tsitsipas and this relationship with his father. I mean, whether it be any of the big three, but even someone like Medvedev, for example, or perhaps Dominic Thiem as well. A few years ago, they're just constantly improving, and I think it's what sets the big three apart from the others. Roger Federer, for example, said that his backhand got better the more and more Rafa would try and pummel it, if you like,
yeah.
and
So
by
I,
the
I
end of
I
his
hope he's able to have a good off season where he's able to actually like just work on these things and get a different voice in his head that's not and be away from his father for like 2 months. I just feel like if he just goes somewhere else and just works or hones in on these things for 2 months straight, doesn't play any tournaments,
yeah,
and just like and stays healthy during that time, that could be really good for him.
yeah,
But it's just, I don't think it's gonna happen
no.
because of the way the season is, and just generally it's yeah, like it's kind of tough to improve once you're already in your mid 20s. And I'm not saying he can improve. I think he certainly can, but it's just time is ticking, and
It
it's
is.
gonna get
It
harder
is.
and harder.
Definitely. Listen, Vanch, thank you very much having you on board. We're not totally down on Stefanos. He could yet have another good end of the year, and like I
Yeah.
say, he may well win his first slam of his career come next year at
And,
25,
and
which
by
would
the way,
be
it's a good thing that we're having this discussion because he's already, like, the slam is like the last thing basically that he has to, basically left. Okay, he hasn't won a 500 yet, but I mean, if he were to win a major, no one would really care, right? So that is kind of like the final piece missing.
yeah. Okay, listen, Vanch, thanks for stopping by. We've been threatening to do this pod for a while. You and I have been talking about it and talking about Stefanos in general. And it was great to talk to you and learn a few things. And I'll be speaking to you again soon.
Yeah, pleasure as always, John. Enjoyed it.
Thanks. Thanks very much, Vanch. Cheers.